Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another 4 p.m. Bible study. My name is Jim Schaefer. I'm a retired pastor and Bible teacher. I share with you every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Now, we are in the middle of a series entitled Divine Disruptions. We are looking at Bible stories from that perspective. And today, we're going to be in the book of Daniel once again. In chapter 6, we have a very familiar story, Daniel in the den of lions. Now, I asked the question on Facebook prior to the start of today's lesson as to whether or not there was a difference between a den of lions and a lion's den. Now, this is one of those things that has bothered me for years, and maybe it's just me. Maybe it's, something wrong with my line of thinking. But I had heard at one point in time someone make the statement, what's the big deal? Daniel was in a lion's den, but there weren't any lions in it. So in my mind, there's a difference between a lion's den and a den of lions. So maybe you hadn't thought of that. Maybe it's only me. Maybe I'm the only one whose mind is that strange. But at any rate, from that time on, this idea of Daniel in a den of lions, to me, is the right way to say it. So today we're going to look at that story, and we're going to look at it from the standpoint of a divine disruption. Now, let's face it. If you were threatened with being thrown into a den of anything, probably it would be a divine disruption, now wouldn't it? I don't like the idea of being thrown into anything other than maybe a swimming pool, and even that at my age would probably be a little scary. But Daniel is faced with a den of lions. And again, this is a disruption. However, there are a number of divine disruptions that are happening in this particular story. And that's really what I want to look at here today. Let's take a moment and see who has joined us. If anyone is watching live or perhaps you're here live. If so, welcome. Maybe you're watching after the fact in one of the reruns on either Facebook or on my YouTube channel. No matter how you've got here, thanks for being here. I really do appreciate it. I hope you will find today's lesson to be meaningful and enriching in your life. Well, I see that we've got Jeff Pugh with us. Hello, Jeff. I'm glad that you're here. I know others will be joining us here in a matter of moments. I cannot tell you how pleased I am at the number of people that this little ministry is reaching out to. In my retirement, it provides me with an outlet, an ability to share what I believe God has laid on my heart, and it allows me to have a ministry even in retirement. And for that, I am very grateful. Thank you for being here. Share with friends, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. All those things really do make a difference, and I really appreciate your time. Well, there's few stories found in the Bible that resonate with people like the story of Daniel in the den of lions. This is a profound example of a divine disruption and divine deliverance. Well, let's take a moment to look at the backstory. How is it that we got here? In our last lesson, we talked about three Hebrew young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they were thrown into a fiery furnace by King Nebuchadnezzar. Well, now here in chapter 6, we see that there's a different king on the throne. What's going on? What has happened? Well, the Babylonian Empire has fallen by the time we reach chapter 6. There's a new king on the throne. King Darius is a king of the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, if you remember, in our last lesson, we saw a huge statue that Nebuchadnezzar built. And the description of the statue was that it had a head of gold. And Daniel made it clear that Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom, the Babylonian Empire, was the head of gold. There then was the chest and arms of silver. And that would be the next empire that would take over. That was the Medo-Persian Empire, the Medes and the Persians. And so we see that the Medo-Persian Empire is the empire that conquered the Babylonian Empire, and King Darius is now on the throne. Now, Daniel, just as he had under Nebuchadnezzar, has risen from the position of being a Hebrew slave to a position of power. Daniel had become a governor of sorts in the Babylonian Empire. Well, now that the Babylonian Empire is out of the way, everybody starts over again. In fact, I'm sure the new king cleared house. But once again, Daniel has risen to power. He is now one of the governors of the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, Daniel is well known to King Darius. In fact, according to our text today, Darius even considered making Daniel second in command of the entire nation of the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel chapter 6, verse 3 says, "Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the entire kingdom." So we see that once again, godly behavior has risen Daniel to a position of prominence. He is considered much like Joseph was when he was elevated to the position of second in command in Egypt. Here we see that Daniel is being given this position of honor. Now, he's found favor in King Darius's eyes, but at the same time, this has led to envy and conspiracy among the other officials. And they're not so happy that this foreigner has reached this position of power. And they want to do whatever they can to cause King Darius to have doubt in Daniel. So they manipulate the king into signing a decree that will ultimately send Daniel into the den of lions because he continued to pray to his God, defying the king's edict. Now, what did the men do? Well, they buttered up King Darius. They talked about how great he was and how nobody should pray to any other god but him. You can imagine that this fell on very receptive ears. He liked the sound of that. He wanted all of the attention. Once he signs the decree that nobody can pray to any other god, then these same officials come out and they say, "King, don't you remember signing that decree, that law? Daniel is praying to his God." It was a divine setup. It served to challenge the status quo, where the laws of men sought to override divine law. How had Daniel reached his position? By serving his God and doing what's right. Daniel's faithfulness amidst the disruption is a testament to his trust in God's sovereignty. He was trusting in God alone. Now, the climax of our story is marked by divine deliverance. Daniel's thrown into this den of lions, hungry lions, and he emerges unscathed the next morning. The miraculous survival is not just a personal victory for Daniel, but it's a public demonstration of the power of his God. It disrupted the natural expectations of death, and it delivered a message of hope and faith to everyone who witnessed it. Well, King Darius himself saw and recognized this divine deliverance. leading him to pass a decree that Daniel's God was the only God to be revered and worshiped in his kingdom. Thus, the story of Daniel transcends a mere personal deliverance, and it represents the triumph of the divine that covers all human endeavors. God's plan for people's lives. Now, let's look at our text for today. Again, we're going to look at the idea of this den of lions, not an empty lion's den. And we are going to take a look at how Daniel ended up there and what it meant. So let's look at our text in Daniel chapter 6, starting in verse 16. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel, and they threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." This tells us right here at the very beginning that the king is not very happy with having to do what he is doing. He had passed the decree. He felt trapped by it. He had to save face. And so he throws Daniel, his friend, his advisor, into a den filled with lions. But he says, "May your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you." Verse 17, a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. I want you to think for a moment. And this was a thought that just occurred to me in this very moment. How similar this is to the tomb of Jesus that is going to be sealed, all right? And the seal was designed to make sure that nothing happened to the body of Jesus, that it remained in the tomb. And again, here we see that the king places a seal on the stone that covers the entrance into this den filled with lions. And it was done so that no one but God could rescue Daniel. Verse 18, then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the light of first dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. Then he came near the den. He called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" I want to point out to you, again, he uses this phrase, the God you serve continually. He's recognizing Daniel's faithfulness. Verse 21, Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed, and he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Now, I asked the question again on Facebook prior to the start of today's lesson. We saw in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego the idea that Jesus was with them in the fiery furnace. There was a fourth man there who looked like a son of the gods. Do you think Jesus made an appearance in the den of lions? Give me your answer in the chat. I would love to know what you think. Do you think Jesus made an appearance there? Is there anything in the text that would indicate to us? I want you to notice back in, let's see what verse it was. Let me jump back there. Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel." Again, is this perhaps the presence of Jesus Christ? We know there is a divine being that is there in the den of lions with Daniel. In my mind, though, I think about some references concerning Jesus Christ. For example, in Revelation chapter 5, verse 5, it says, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed." This is a clear reference to Jesus himself. He is the Lion of Judah. I don't know whether he made an appearance in that den of lions and he showed up as a lion, the Lion of Judah, and basically made it clear to the other lions that were there that this one you do not touch. This one belongs to me. Now, I know it's speculation, but I think it's fun to look at the story and just begin to imagine what might have taken place there. Well, I've got a couple of questions for you. When you look at this story, from whose perspective is the story written? Was it from Daniel's perspective, or was it King Darius's? Now, in some ways, it's both. But what is really surprising to me is that we see more of an emphasis upon King Darius than we see on Daniel. We're told that King Darius has trouble sleeping. He is very anxious. He is upset about what happens. We don't know what went on with Daniel in the den of lions. Now, Daniel is writing this, but he's writing it from the perspective of King Darius. The second thing I want to ask you is, can you see the affection that King Darius has for Daniel? Twice he refers to Daniel's faithfulness. He is concerned that Daniel's God deliver him. And the third question that I want you to think about is, since this is a part of our Divine Disruption series, whose life is most disrupted in this story? Let's take a look at the idea here in Daniel chapter 1, or in chapter 6. Let's look at it again. I've kind of highlighted a few verses for you. "So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel, threw him into the den of lions," lion's den. "The king said to Daniel, 'May your God whom you serve continually rescue you.'" Do you see the hope that is in that statement? We're seeing not Daniel being troubled, but we see a troubled mind with King Darius. We see some regret. He hates that he has had to throw Daniel into the lion's den. "A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the ring of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not change." I don't think he does this willingly, but he does it because he's made it a law. Verse 18, "Then the king returned to his palace." Again, wouldn't you think the attention would be upon Daniel and what he's experiencing in that den of lions? But instead, in the text, we go back to the palace and we spend the night with King Darius. And we find that he spends the night without eating, without entertainment being brought to him. And he couldn't sleep. This indicates to us depression and anxiety and fear. The truth is, what we are seeing in this is the king is on a emotional roller coaster. Now, you would have thought Daniel would have been the one on this emotional roller coaster, but the truth is, it seems to be King Darius. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. Again, we see the emphasis is not upon Daniel, but upon King Darius. He gets up early, he hurries to the lion's den, he's anxious to find out. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel. He doesn't even wait until he gets there. You notice how the text makes it very clear that he's just getting close and he can't wait to find out. And he calls out to Daniel in an anguished voice. We don't see Daniel being filled with fear. We don't see Daniel anguished, but we see it with King Darius. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? There's hope that we see in King Darius. It is a roller coaster when we look at his life. Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God has sent his angels and shut the mouth of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. I have done no wrong to you." He then makes it very clear that God has been with him. He says, the king was overjoyed, relieved, and he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den of lions. Now, to me, if I were to take and chart this, and by the way, I did just that, and in this chart, I kind of compared Daniel and King Darius. Daniel, you see an individual who is steadfast, who has trust in God, who has faith, a very even keel. He's not upset, he's not worried, he is not on an emotional roller coaster. I would be, but he's not, all right? On the other hand, King Darius, he starts out with hope, but then that hope becomes regret and stress and depression and anxiety and anguish and anger. And then it ends with him being overjoyed. There's the emotional roller coaster. Now, I'd like to mention that to me there is another aspect of divine disruption in this story. Yes, I'm sure Daniel had some divine disruption. King Darius, certainly, this was a divine disruption for him, even though he's not spending the night in the den of lions. But what does he do once Daniel is safe? King Darius then takes those advisors who had accused Daniel and he throws them and their families into the den of lions. This has taken a turn. These men had hoped to sever the relationship between Daniel and King Darius, and instead he causes them to have a divine judgment in their life as well. Well, let me give you a couple of very quick modern day lessons that I think are important to consider. The very first one is an unshakable faith in God. What we see in this story is that despite the decree that anyone who prays to any god would be thrown into the lion's den, Daniel continues to practice his faith openly. He's not going to be deterred from doing what he knows is right. His unwavering belief in God serves as a reminder to every one of us that true faith does not waver in the face of trials or decrees that are set by man. Daniel's story exemplifies the kind of unshakable faith that God wants us to have in every circumstance of life. We too can find strength and conviction with God, trusting that He is always with us, guiding us and protecting us. The second lesson that I think this story demonstrates is a commitment to prayer. You see, Daniel is determined that he's going to continue to pray even though the law says he cannot. It teaches us the importance of prayer. It teaches us the importance of our connection with God. In our modern world, where distractions abound, prioritizing prayer in our life helps us stay connected to God and to seek His guidance in all aspects of our life. The third thing that I think this story demonstrates for us is integrity in the midst of adversity. Daniel's refusal to compromise his integrity, even under pressure, reminds us to uphold our values and principles regardless of external circumstances. In our workplaces, in our relationships, in our daily interactions, God wants us to maintain integrity. That is crucial for our witness as believers. We need to make sure that we are people of integrity, just as Daniel was. Number 4, this story teaches us God's protection and deliverance. Daniel's miraculous deliverance from the den of lions demonstrates God's faithfulness and protection. We can trust that God is our refuge and He will deliver us from our own lions, whether they're literal dangers or whether they're simply the challenges that every single one of us face every day of our life. Number 5 is that there is influence through example. You see, Daniel isn't out boasting that he's praying. Daniel is praying. Daniel is not trying to draw attention to himself. It is his unwavering faith and courage that influences those around him. As modern day believers, our actions and our character can impact others to a far greater degree than any of us can even begin to imagine. By living out our faith authentically, we become beacons of hope and inspiration to those who observe our lives. We must set the example. Number 6, the consequence of envy. The jealousy and envy of Daniel's colleagues led them to make this accusation concerning him, and it resulted in a very difficult situation for Daniel. Envy can still harm relationships and lead to destructive behavior. We need to learn not only from the faith of Daniel, but we need to learn from those who sought to accuse Daniel, and they allowed envy to poison their hearts. And finally, lesson number 7 is the sovereignty of God. Daniel's story ultimately highlights God's sovereignty. Even in dire circumstances, God was in control and His plan prevailed. Trusting in God's sovereignty helps us navigate the uncertainties that there are in life, and it helps us to find peace in His purposes. God is with us. God is for us. God loves us. Well, I hope you found today's lesson to be beneficial. I hope you've seen something in this story that perhaps you didn't see before. I hope you've caught the idea of that emotional roller coaster that King Darius was on and compared it to the emotional steadfastness of Daniel. We can go through life trusting in our God. Now, I know sometimes difficulties come. Sometimes we, fear the ups and downs and the difficulties of life. But Daniel's story reminds us that God is in control and we can trust in Him. Well, next week I want to go on just a little bit further. I've got 2 more stories in the Old Testament. One is concerning Jonah, and we'll take a look at that on Tuesday of next week. And then I want to look at a passage in Ezekiel them bones, them dry bones. All right. And so we'll take a look at that on Thursday of next week. I think you'll enjoy both of those lessons. I hope you have a wonderful week. I want to thank you for being here and being a part of our story here today. If you want to stay online and chat for a little bit, I will gladly respond to you. Until next week, thank you so much. I look forward to sharing with you again real soon. God bless you.